Idols cause us to compromise, and they rob us of potential and promise. They weigh us down and hinder us spiritually, emotional, and relationally. Now the Lord said to Abraham, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house, the land that I will show you. The call of Abraham begins with the words in Hebrew, lech lecha. Can you say that with me? Lech, got to get the cha in there. Lech lecha. These two words, lech lecha, have a twofold meaning. Number one, it implies when God says to Abraham, lech lecha, he's telling him to go on a physical journey. He literally has to leave his house, his father's house, his family, okay? But it also implies not just a physical journey, it implies a spiritual inner journey as well. And the first was for the sake of the second, right? The physical journey was really for the sake of the deeper spiritual journey that God wanted Abraham to go on. And really, the Lord is asking, God in this passage is asking more than just a change of address. It's not like he just wants Abraham to change locations, okay? The words lech lecha, okay? Can you just again say it with me? Lech lecha, okay? I like it, Aaron. Let's go. Lech lecha. All right. Okay. Can either be translated go for yourself or go to yourself. Only by going will Abraham or you and I only by going will you begin to find and reveal your true identity. And Abraham and Sarah, they were spiritual pioneers and champions. And he is meant to be a role model for each and every one of us. And the rabbis encourage us to ask the question, and this is the question, when will our deeds reach those of our fathers? When will our deeds reach those of our fathers and our mothers? But for our deeds to reach the level of Abraham or David or Yeshua or the disciples, we have to examine their lives and understand how they lived. And they will teach us a lot about becoming spiritual champions and co-laborers with God who experience his blessing, right? God wants you to be a spiritual pioneer. He wants you to be a spiritual champion. But how do we become spiritual champions? What does that mean for us practically? What are some of the key principles? What's the foundation? Well, I believe first and foremost, spiritual champions have their identity rooted in God and rooted in faith. Abraham had to lech lecha, he had to go in order to find his true identity and his true destiny. And we have to understand that, as we've said before, identity is destiny. Will you say that with me? Identity is destiny. You will never be able to manifest or walk in the fullness of your destiny if there is confusion about your identity. If your identity is rooted in the wrong things, you will never get to the fullness. So we have to root out the wrong things to get to our true identity. I think that's so key. Abraham, you can never do anything great for God until you've answered two key questions. And I love it. We talked about this when we were just in Israel at Caesarea Philippi. That's where Yeshua took the disciples and he asked them, who do you say that I am? And I love going deeper into the story there because there's so much more. And it's just so powerful to be there. But so I one day was spending time with God and I felt God say to me, Jason, who do you say that I am? I'm like, duh, you're the Messiah. You're the Son of God. Peter settled that. And the Lord's like, no, Jason, that's not what I'm asking you. I'm not asking you, who am I? Because you've already settled that question. He said, Jason, I want you to ask me, God, Yeshua, Who do you say that I am? Wow. Those are the two most important question. Who is Yeshua? What is his identity? Is he the Messiah? Is he the Son of God? Is he your Redeemer? But once that's settled, the second most important question is, who does God say you are? Because I'll tell you something, right? We got to know who God says we are, who God created us to be, because there's so many voices around you that want to try and tell you who you are or what you should be, and whatever defines you has power over your life. So we have to know who God is and who he created us to be, so we don't get lost and lose ourselves along the journey. It is so easy to lose yourself in life by just defining yourself by your kids, or defining yourself by this or that. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But it reminds me of a story, right? Yeshua loves to tell stories. Good rabbis, good teachers tell stories. So there's a story about this town called Chelm. And in this town called Chelm, it's a fun Jewish story. There's kind of like lived a lot of foolish souls, okay? And one day, like Jewish people in Eastern Europe and in Europe love like to go to the schwitz, to the bathhouse, right? And relax. So the sauna, in a sense, right? And so one day, this kind of silly guy in Chelm went to the sauna, and he said, look, when we don't have our clothes on, we all look alike. How do I make sure that I remember who I am? So what does he do? He comes up with what he thinks is a brilliant idea. He says, I'll tie a red cord around my big toe. And that way I'll make sure that I recognize myself and I don't forget who I am, right? Well, he comes out of the schwitz and he looks down and there's no red cord on his toe. He looks up and he sees someone else with his red cord on his toe. Obviously, we know the red cord slipped off in the water and somehow got on the other guy's toe, but he's totally confused. And he turns to the guy and he says, listen, I know who you are, but can you tell me who I am? Right? It's such a great story because all of us have those red cords in our lives that define us, right? That red cord could be your children. It could be your job. It could be a hobby, a skill, a relationship. I mean, it could be so many different things, both positive or negative, okay? And when you lose, if it's any of those things that define you and you lose those things, you can lose your job, you can lose, God forbid, a loved one, right? Then you don't know who you are anymore and you're lost. The only thing that should define us, or the primary thing that should define us, our identity needs to be rooted in being a child of God, in our relationship with him. Who does God say you are? Who does Yeshua say that you are? Okay. All sorts of people, all sorts of influences will try to tell you who you are and what you should do with your life, right? And part of this Abraham, Lech Lecha, go to yourself, is that Abraham had to learn to understand who he was, his identity and his mission. That's why, not in light of where he came from, leave your father's house, but in light of who God says he was to become. Abraham had to leave behind, like all of us have to leave behind where we come from, in a sense, and who we were to become who we're truly created us to be. Because again, there are so many things that seek to define us and our destiny that don't come from God or Messiah, Yeshua. Think about it for a moment. Abraham didn't have an illustrious past. He was from Ur. That was a part of Babylon, the Babylonian Empire, okay, which was ruled by Nimrod, the person who, according to Jewish tradition, built the Tower of Babel not long after the flood, right? So he's not from he's from a technologically advanced area, but he's from an idolatrous area, right? And his dad, Terah, was an idol worshiper. We know this, right? From the scriptures. But even more than his father being an idol worshiper, Jewish tradition says, funny enough, his father was an idol maker, right? I mean, it's crazy. So there's a story about Abraham. It's not in the Bible, it's in Jewish tradition, that Abraham's father was this seller of idols, right? And Abraham's father asked Abraham to mind the store for him. And so a big wealthy man comes in, he wants to buy an idol. He says, give me an idol that befits my status. And Abram says, gave him the largest. He said, how old are you? And the man says, 50 years old. He says, aren't you embarrassed to worship an idol that was just created yesterday and you're 50 years old? And the man left. An old woman comes in and says, hey, my idols were stolen. I need new ones. And Abraham's like, if they couldn't protect themselves, why do you think those idols are going to protect you and your house? How can they help you? And she said, who should I worship? And Abraham said, the one God, the creator of heaven and earth. And she left. And a third woman came in and offered food to one of the biggest, to some of the idols, and left. And Abraham took a stick, smashed all the idols, except the big one, put the stick in the big one, and buy all the food by it. And his father came back and he's like, what happened? And he's like, listen, a woman came and brought food. All of the idols wanted to eat, but the biggest idol smashed them all, saying he's taking it for himself. And and Terah said, don't you know, what are you talking about? What are you, Meshuggah? Or what are you, crazy? Idols don't speak or move. And so Abraham says, why do you worship them? Right? I mean, think about it. They have mouths, but they don't speak, eyes, but they don't see, ears, but they don't hear, feet, but they don't walk, hands, but they don't feel. So why is this important? Because one of the keys to being a spiritual champion is to put away idols and pursue the blessing of God. Recognize God, have faith in him, serve him. This is the first commandment. I am the Lord your God. You'll have no other idols before me. We have to put away idols. And idols are those things that we serve either before or in place of God. People, work, money, sex, position, prominence, power, pleasure, entertainment, and even serving God ministry can be an idol. Why? Idols give us a sense of identity. Idols give us a sense of worth and status and comfort and satisfaction and pleasure. That is the power that is in them, right? You define yourself, and money can be an idol because it gives you a sense of worth and status and identity. Your job, your position, your looks, your children's success, so many things. And the reality is that those who make idols become like them. If your identity is rooted in an idol, something that takes the place that only God should have in your life, okay? The things that you worship, you become like them. We become like what we love. We become like what we worship, right? That's why oftentimes people look like their pets. They love them so much. They idolize them so much, they become like them, right? I remember when I was young and I idolize Michael Jordan. I want to be like Mike. And when I played basketball, I used to stick out my tongue as I slam dunk, as I did slam dunks on my hoop that I lowered, right? So I could dunk like Mike, right? Spiritual champions don't allow idols in their lives. Why? Idols are compromise. Idols cause us to compromise, and they rob us of potential and promise. They weigh us down and hinder us spiritually, emotional, and relationally. Friends, what are the strings? What are the idols? What are the things that are defining you? What are the people that you're giving or things you're giving power over your identity and your destiny that shouldn't have it?